awkward timestamps, and entitled grades. I've been a professor at this community college for over a decade, and I've seen my fair share of interesting parental interactions. But the day that Mrs. Henderson burst into my midterm review to contest her son's grade was one for the books. It was a typical Wednesday in early October, and I had just started going over the exam questions with a group of about 20 students. The door swung open, and in walked a woman in her late 40s, waving a piece of paper in the air. "Professor Thompson," she called out, scanning the room until her eyes landed on me. I paused the lecture, both surprised and irritated by the interruption. "Yes, how can I help you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level. Mrs. Henderson marched up to my desk, slamming down the paper in front of me. "This is my son James's midterm," she said, jabbing her finger at the page. "He says you marked him down for not citing sources, but he insists that he did." I looked at the time-stamped rubric next to the exam and saw that James had indeed missed several crucial citations. Before I could respond, Mrs. Henderson launched into a heated tirade about how her son wasn't a student and how I must have made a mistake. The rest of the class watched in stunned silence as I calmly explained my grading process and showed Mrs. Henderson exactly where James had gone wrong. As she spoke, I couldn't help but notice the faint scent of perfume wafting from her direction, a sweet, floral smell that clashed with the tense atmosphere in the room. "I don't understand why you're being so difficult," Mrs. Henderson said, her voice rising. "My son is a good student, and he deserves an A." I took a deep breath and tried to remain patient. "Ma'am, I assure you that my grading process is fair and unbiased. The rubric is clear, and James has simply failed to meet the requirements." Mrs. Henderson scoffed at this, her eyes flashing with anger. "You're just trying to fail him," she accused. I felt a surge of frustration, but I kept my cool. "That's not true, ma'am. I'm simply holding your son to the same standards that I hold all of my students." After what felt like an eternity, Mrs. Henderson finally began to calm down, her breathing slowing as she realized that I wasn't going to back down. She glared at me for a moment longer before storming out of the room, leaving me to continue the midterm review with a slightly shaken group of students. As the door closed behind her, I let out a sigh of relief and turned back to the class. "Okay, where were we?" I asked, trying to sound cheerful despite the awkwardness that had just transpired. The students looked at each other nervously before one of them spoke up. "I think we were on question 3, he said hesitantly. I nodded and began to review the answers once more, grateful for the distraction from the uncomfortable encounter with Mrs. Henderson. It was an awkward and uncomfortable situation, but I was glad that I had stood my ground and defended my grading standards. As a professor, it's important to be firm yet compassionate when dealing with entitled parents like Mrs. Henderson. After all, we're not just teaching our students, we're also preparing them for the real world, where they won't always get their way.